Never did I imagine I would encounter a circumstance such as this. It was an unexpected twist, one I had never envisioned or contemplated, yet life has a way of unfolding in ways that defy our expectations. It began on a seemingly mundane afternoon, the sort that ought to slip quietly into the recesses of memory, unremarkable and easily forgotten. Yet that day lingered in memory. That day transformed everything. The residence lay in stillness, accompanied only by the gentle murmur of the air conditioning and the sporadic song of birds beyond the windows. I had just completed the task of tidying up the kitchen when I sensed a gaze upon me, not momentary, but persistent and purposeful. As I pivoted, there he stood, framed in the doorway. My stepson, Logan. Logan had always exhibited a certain politeness and respect, embodying the essence of a young man who instinctively held doors open and expressed gratitude without needing a nudge. Yet recently, there was an unmistakable shift in the way he gazed at me. Initially, I dismissed it as inconsequential. At 22, he found himself traversing the delicate terrain between the innocence of boyhood and the responsibilities of true adulthood, still in search of his place in the world. He had always shared a strong bond with his father, yet with his dad's increasing work-related travels, he found himself spending more time in my company. I was indifferent. I appreciated the company, yet this experience felt distinct. His gaze was anything but casual. It was direct and focused, as if he were attempting to decipher my thoughts, poised to observe my reaction. A warmth surged within my chest, an unsettling yet exhilarating sensation intertwining in a curious dance. "Is there something you require?" I inquired, maintaining a calm tone. He paused briefly, then slowly shook his head. "No, just pondering. Contemplating. Concerning what matter?" I might have posed the question, yet the answer was already clear to me. Perhaps, in some hidden corner of my heart, I longed to hear those words spoken aloud. Instead, I redirected my attention to the sink, concentrating on the soapy water spiraling down the drain. The evening's dinner unfolded with an air of normalcy, or so it was meant to be. The television flickered softly in the background as I sat opposite Logan at the dining table. I inquired about his courses and his aspirations for the summer ahead. He responded, yet there was an unmistakable quality in his tone, a subtle sharpness that was not typically present. His gaze lingered on me, as if he were anticipating a moment, a chance to seize. As the night deepened and I retreated to my room, a soft knock echoed at my bedroom door. The hour had grown late, far too late for idle chatter. With a moment's pause, I drew in a breath, my heart quickening at the sight of him standing there. He appeared as though he had words teetering on the edge of his tongue, yet uncertainty held him back from finding the right beginning. He simply ran a hand through his hair. I find myself in a state of uncertainty. I hadn't either, yet I sensed we were poised at the brink of something, a boundary we were not meant to breach, yet one that was beginning to fade into ambiguity. "Logan," I said with caution, "this isn't—" "I know," he interrupted. "Yet, that does not alter the situation, does it?" His words lingered in the air, dense and electric. I ought to have taken a step back, closed the door, and halted whatever was unfolding before it even began. Yet, I remained in my place, observing him, biding my time. "Wishing you a peaceful night." He finally spoke, his voice softer now, as if he had arrived at an unspoken resolution. He turned and walked away, leaving me there, my pulse racing. I shut the door behind me, yet slumber eluded me that night. I found myself wide awake, gazing at the ceiling, lost in thoughts of the expression in his eyes and the strain in his voice. It was a mistake. The peril was palpable. It was an occurrence I should have never permitted. And yet, I sensed that this was far from finished. Far from it. The following morning, I awoke with the distinct sensation that I had scarcely found any rest at all. The previous night replayed in my thoughts, an unrelenting loop, and I was unable to dispel the sense that something irrevocable had changed between us. I navigated my morning routine with an air of normalcy, clinging to the hope that by feigning ignorance of recent events, they might quietly fade into the annals of the past. As I descended the stairs and caught sight of Logan in the kitchen, a realization washed over me. I had been mistaken. He leaned against the counter, a coffee mug cradled in his hands, observing me with the same intensity that had enveloped me the night before. "Morning," he remarked nonchalantly, as though nothing was amiss. "Morning," I echoed, mustering a smile. I moved with intention as I filled my cup with coffee, mindful to avoid his gaze for more than a fleeting moment. If I revealed too much, if I allowed him a glimpse into the tumult of my mind, I feared I might never reclaim those thoughts. I lingered at the table, wishing that perhaps if I maintained my distance, the palpable tension might dissipate. Yet Logan remained. He chose to sit across from me, savoring each slow sip of his coffee. "It seems you didn't get much sleep," he finally remarked. I glanced up suddenly, my heart racing in my chest. "What leads you to that conclusion?" "I could sense your presence, restless in the late hours." He was observing me once more, that familiar probing gaze that sent a flutter of unease through my stomach. I willed myself to remain composed, to maintain a buoyant tone in my voice. "I suppose I simply struggled to find my footing. There is nothing out of the ordinary." He took his time to reply. He leaned forward, placing his mug down with intention. Could it be my fault? There it stood, the inquiry I had long feared, the one that threatened to draw me deeper into this perilous realm if I didn't tread cautiously. "Logan, we must tread carefully," I remarked, my voice unwavering even as my hands tightened in my lap. "I understand that things seem altered recently, but it's not merely a matter of perception. They are indeed different," he interjected. I took a deep breath. "That does not imply we must take action on it." He regarded me intently for what felt like an eternity, and in a fleeting instant, I dared to hope that perhaps this would be the conclusion of our encounter. Perhaps he would nod, acknowledge my words, and we could return to the familiar rhythm of our past. He rose to his feet, each movement measured and intentional, as he circled the table and approached me. My breath hitched as he rested a hand on the back of my chair, his presence so near that I could sense his warmth enveloping me. "Surely, you can't truly hold that belief, can you?" he whispered softly. My heart raced within my chest. I had to put an end to this, to rise and create some space between us. Yet, I remained still. I was unable to. He extended his hand, the slightest touch of his fingers grazing my arm, and I sensed a change in the atmosphere around us. "Logan." I inhaled softly, my voice a mere whisper. He lingered, his gaze fixed on me, anticipating my signal to proceed. In a single, heart-pounding instant, the desire surged within me. The creak of the front door swung open, fracturing the stillness of the moment. I recoiled as my husband entered the house, placing his briefcase down with a weary sigh. "Greetings, my dear." He reached out. I apologize for my delayed response. The traffic was unbearable. I sprang from my seat, adrenaline coursing through my veins. "You've returned home earlier than expected." He approached with a smile, leaning in to kiss my cheek, completely unaware of the tempest that had just been gathering in the air around us. The meetings concluded sooner than anticipated. "I had a little surprise in mind for you. That is, quite pleasant." I persevered, mustering a smile. Logan had departed, his demeanor inscrutable. Yet, the heaviness of what nearly transpired between us lingered in the air. I convinced myself it was trivial, that I would not allow this to escalate any further. Yet, as I stood there with my husband just a few feet away, an undeniable truth settled within me. It was far from over. Far from it. Throughout the remainder of that evening, I found myself evading Logan. Whenever our eyes met, I sensed that my husband could somehow penetrate my facade, as if the burden of what had nearly transpired was etched upon my features. I immersed myself in the kitchen, feigning deep concentration as I chopped vegetables, stirred sauces, and engaged in any task that would keep my hands busy. Logan's presence enveloped the room, a palpable force that lingered, his gaze unwaveringly fixed upon me. The evening meal unfolded in serene silence. My husband, unaware of the palpable tension surrounding us, was engrossed in discussing his meetings, the challenges he faced at work, and his weekend plans. Logan remained mostly silent, offering only brief replies as his fork aimlessly maneuvered the food on his plate. I was just as flawed. Thoughts surged through my mind, while my body remained taut with anticipation. Every nerve tingled with the awareness of his presence, mere inches away across the table. After dinner, my husband sank into the couch, weariness etched on his face from a long day, mindlessly flipping through the channels on the television. I slipped away to the kitchen, feigning a need to tidy up, yet my true intention was to collect my scattered thoughts. As solitude enveloped me, I exhaled slowly, my fingers clutching the edge of the counter. Space, time, and clarity were what I sought, yet none were afforded to me. I sensed his presence before his voice reached my ears. Logan's presence was undeniable, the delicate change in the atmosphere causing a thrill to race down my spine. I remained still, acutely aware of his presence looming just behind me. "We need to talk," he murmured gently. "Not now," I murmured in response, my fingers gripping the dish towel more firmly. "So, when will that be?" His voice lingered in the air, low and insistent, uncomfortably near. It was an error. "It's time to let it go." "You can't possibly believe that," he retorted, advancing a step nearer. "Your eyes reveal it all." I closed my eyes, summoning the resolve to distance myself from him, to halt whatever this was before it could deepen. Yet, as I opened my eyes and turned to confront him, the words lodged themselves in my throat. His expression was inscrutable, yet his eyes revealed a profound intensity, a hint of peril, an unspoken challenge. "Logan." A sound emanating from the living room caused us to halt in our tracks. My husband chuckled at something on the television, blissfully oblivious to the drama that was unfolding just a few feet from him. The enchantment shattered, and I released a trembling breath, retreating a step. "It's time for you to go to bed," I declared with conviction. "This dialogue has reached its conclusion." He paused, his jaw clenched, yet after what felt like an eternity, he finally gave a nod. In silence, he pivoted and strode away, vanishing into the shadows of the staircase. I rested against the counter, my heart racing. I had brought it to a close, I had established a boundary. Yet, beneath the surface, I recognized that boundary had begun to fade the instant I allowed myself to consider the possibility of something greater. The subsequent days were steeped in an oppressive tension. Logan lingered in the background, a steadfast reminder of the near-miss that haunted them both. He refrained from pressing me, avoiding any attempts to trap me once more, yet the silence that enveloped us was heavy with the weight of unexpressed thoughts. That Friday, my husband departed for yet another business trip, planting a gentle kiss on my cheek before stepping through the door, suitcase in tow. "Call me if you need anything," he said, a warm smile gracing his lips. I inclined my head, mustering a smile. "I shall. Stay safe." As the door clicked shut behind him, I exhaled a breath I hadn't known I was holding. In that moment, I sensed it. The burden of an observer's gaze upon me. I pivoted, and there he stood, poised at the base of the stairs. "Logan." Silence enveloped him, a powerful statement in itself. The silence lingered in the air, heavy with the unspoken truths that neither of us had the courage to voice. In that instant, I realized I was perched on the brink of an irreversible choice, and uncertainty gripped me. Did I truly wish to halt my descent into the unknown? The house carried a different essence in the absence of my husband. The stillness enveloped the space, heavy with a sense of expectation. I was aware that Logan remained in the house, yet he had not uttered a single word since my husband departed that morning. The tension between us had intensified, unvoiced yet unmistakable, hovering in the atmosphere like an invisible force drawing me nearer to a desire I understood I ought to resist. I occupied my hands with trivial chores, yearning for the distractions to soften the relentless thoughts that invaded my mind. I polished the counters, meticulously organized the spice rack, and even folded laundry that was perfectly fine as it was. Yet, my thoughts remained irresistibly drawn to him. As the clock chimed 12, it dawned on me that Logan had been absent from my sight all morning. Had he departed? Was he steering clear of me? A blend of relief and disappointment took residence in my chest. I reprimanded myself, shaking my head in disbelief at my own concern. I required a moment, a pause to gather my thoughts before I made a decision I might regret forever. As I entered the living room, I settled onto the couch, seeking solace in the flickering screen of the television to provide a welcome distraction. Yet, just as my fingers brushed the remote, the sound of footsteps echoed from the stairs. I shifted my gaze, and there he stood. Logan lingered at the foot of the staircase, his gaze fixed upon me. He appeared lost in contemplation, his hands poised on the banister, as though weighing the decision to approach. My heart raced. "You've been avoiding me," I said. The instant the words left my lips, a wave of regret washed over me. I believed that was your desire, he responded, his tone steady and inscrutable. I took a deep breath. I find myself at a loss, uncertain of the dynamics unfolding between us. He advanced with purpose, his demeanor composed yet intentional. "I believe you do." I let out a sharp breath, my fingers clenching in my lap. "Logan, this is impossible." "But why not?" He broke in. His voice carried a quiet strength, and his gaze was unwavering, fixed intently on mine. "You continue to feign indifference, yet I perceive the truth beneath your facade. I sense it deeply." I parted my lips to protest, yet no sound emerged, for he was undeniably correct. I sensed it, and to deny it only intensified its grip. He advanced another step in my direction, and I was acutely aware that I ought to rise, to establish some space, to halt whatever was unfolding before it veered into chaos, yet I remained still. "Fear lingers in your eyes," he murmured, his tone gentler than before. "Not due to the inherent wrongness of the act, but rather from the uncertainty of your own ability to restrain yourself." My breath hitched in my throat. "Logan." Before I could complete my thought, he was suddenly before me, so near that I could sense the warmth emanating from his skin. My heart raced wildly within my chest. "I won't do anything you don't desire," he murmured, his gaze steady and unyielding. "However, it is essential to maintain honesty with oneself." I shut my eyes, striving to cast aside the tumult of feelings churning within me. This was not merely a matter of temptation. It was the profound bond that had been quietly developing between us, a bond one had exerted considerable effort to overlook. As I slowly opened my eyes, I found him still gazing at me, poised in anticipation of my reply. I found myself uncertain, questioning whether I possessed the strength to provide him with the answer he truly deserved. The atmosphere hung heavy with expectation, silence enveloping us, both hesitant to break the stillness or shift from our places. The sound of my heartbeat echoed in my ears, rapid and relentless, pulsating against my ribs as if it sought to alert me to the truth I was already aware of. I ought to have taken a step back, to have urged him to depart, to let go of whatever had been simmering between us. Yet I remained, my breath shallow, my hands pressing against my thighs in a bid to anchor myself. Logan's gaze lingered on me, expectant, as if anticipating a revelation. A nod of approval, a gentle push, a signal that my desire mirrored his own. And therein lay the issue. I indeed did. Yet desire alone could not rectify the situation. I rose to my feet, managing a laugh that came out more anxious than nonchalant. "We are engaging in absurdity." His jaw clenched ever so slightly, yet he remained steadfast, refusing to retreat. "I sense your skepticism." I took a deep breath. "Logan, this doesn't seem right." He interrupted me before I had the chance to complete my thought. "For it feels entirely right." I inhaled sharply, the words lodged in my throat. It transcended the question of right or wrong. It revolved around the repercussions, the burden of decisions that could never be undone. I shook my head in disbelief. "It is of no consequence. It is not possible for us to do so." He released a breath through his nostrils, his face a mask of inscrutability. For what felt like an eternity, he remained silent, motionless, his gaze fixed on me with a level of patience that sent my stomach into a tumultuous spiral. Then, as if reaching a conclusion, he took a step back. "Very well." I blinked. The distance that separates us has become overwhelming, a vast emptiness that looms large. "Is everything all right?" He inclined his head, his expression a mystery. "If you truly think we ought to overlook this, that it holds no significance, then I will let it go. I shall refrain from mentioning it once more." Relief ought to have enveloped me. I ought to have felt a sense of relief, comforted by the fact that he was offering me a way out, a chance to flee from something I had no right to consider. Yet, all that resonated within me was a profound emptiness in my chest. I offered a deliberate nod, pushing aside the disappointment that coiled within me. That is for the best. A fleeting shadow danced across his features, an elusive emotion I struggled to identify. Indeed. He pivoted, making his way toward the stairs in silence. I allowed him to proceed without interruption. I chose not to return his call. I remained rooted to the spot, observing him fade away, a heavy sense of incompleteness bearing down on my shoulders. After that, the house carried an unmistakable weight of change. The silence that enveloped us was not merely dense. It was an enigma, shrouded in mystery. Logan maintained a careful distance, neither unkind nor harsh, yet far enough that his absence echoed in every room I entered. I convinced myself that this was my desire, that this was the correct path to take. Yet, each time I noticed him gazing at me from across the room, that same inscrutable look in his eyes, I found myself questioning whether what was right could truly be equated with what was merely bearable. The subsequent days unfolded in a hush, an unsettling stillness enveloping everything. Logan honored his promise. He refrained from mentioning it again, held back from pressing the issue, and respected all boundaries. Yet the atmosphere surrounding us lingered, heavy with all that was left unspoken. Relief should have washed over me, perhaps even a sense of gratitude, at the thought that he had chosen to step back. Yet, what I experienced was something altogether different, a sensation that disturbed me far more than the guilt I had anticipated. I let it slip away. I longed for the intensity of his stare, the way he dared me to confront the truth, compelling me to face reality rather than flee from it. The absence of his presence rendered the house even more desolate. The hours elongated, and I found myself in a state of anticipation, yearning for an event I had already convinced myself was impossible. I immersed myself in diversions. I ventured out more frequently, attending to tasks that hardly required my attention, seeking justifications to be anywhere but alone in the confines of my mind. During my time at home, I immersed myself in various tasks, preparing intricate dishes that went unrequested, seeking to engage both my hands and thoughts. Yet, nothing seemed to make a difference. For all my efforts to mask it, the truth lingered just beneath the surface, undeniable and clear. I desired him. Realizing that he had released his grip, that he had chosen to cease his relentless pursuit, did little to ease the burden. It only exacerbated the situation. Now, it was I who pondered the possibilities of what could have been. I found myself grappling with the temptation to breach the boundary I had meticulously established. As the night deepened, a day spent in mutual evasion came to a close, and I found myself startled by the sound of footsteps echoing in the hallway. In the kitchen, I stood at the sink, scrubbing dishes, attempting to immerse myself in the soothing cadence of water, seeking refuge from the restless turmoil that wound itself tightly within me. As I pivoted, he stood there, framed in the doorway. I stood still, my fingers clutching the rim of the sink. "Is there an issue?" Though my voice remained unwavering, my pulse betrayed a different story. "No," he said, his expression a mask of inscrutability. "I had a fleeting hope that perhaps you had finished evading my presence." I took a deep breath. "I assure you, I'm not evading your presence." He raised an eyebrow, unmistakably skeptical. "Indeed. Is that the reason you've hardly spoken to me in days?" I redirected my attention to the sink, immersing myself in the act of scrubbing the plate in my grasp, despite its already pristine condition. "I believe this is the wisest course of action." "Do you?" He entered the kitchen, drawing nearer, not too near, yet close enough for me to sense the warmth of his presence. "It certainly appears otherwise." I switched off the faucet and let out a slow breath before turning to face him. "Logan, we had a mutual understanding." "No," he interjected with a seamless grace. "You consented." "I simply chose not to contest your decision." I sealed my lips, fingers clutching the countertop's edge. "Isn't that essentially identical?" "Far from it." He regarded me, his eyes deliberate and scrutinizing. You wish for me to pretend that all is as it seems, yet I'm aware of the truth, and so are you. A chill coursed through me, yet I stood resolute. That doesn't imply we must take any action regarding it. He advanced a step, drawing near enough for me to discern the challenge flickering in his gaze, the frustration simmering just below the surface. So, what keeps you rooted in this spot? I parted my lips, yet silence enveloped me. For there existed no response that wouldn't unravel the very fabric of it all. He inclined his head ever so slightly, pausing, offering me one final opportunity to reject him. Yet I refrained, and that was precisely the response he sought. The moment lingered in the air, a stillness enveloping us as we remained frozen, each hesitant to draw a breath too forcefully. The intensity of his gaze enveloped me, a palpable challenge hanging in the air, urging me to falter first. Perhaps I had already done so. Perhaps I had been fracturing for some time, fragment by fragment, until all that remained was the unavoidable. I might have chosen to turn and leave. I might have shoved him away, halted the instant before it had the opportunity to settle in. Yet I refrained. Instead, I remained rooted to the spot, my heart racing wildly within my chest, my breath coming in quick, shallow gasps, anticipating his words, any words that might compel me to confront a choice I was far from prepared to face. "You don't want me to walk away," he finally said, his voice low yet resolute. I took a deep breath, my fingers gripping the edge of the counter tightly. "Logan, this isn't. Don't say it's wrong," he interrupted. "I can see that you have your doubts." I let out a sharp breath, momentarily shutting my eyes. My beliefs hold no significance. What is right holds significance. He moved nearer, the distance between us dwindling to nearly zero. "Does this not sit right with you?" I remained silent, for we both understood the reality that lay between us. It did not. It seemed unavoidable, as if it had been on the horizon for ages, regardless of my attempts to resist it. "Then cease the pretense," he whispered. His words coursed through me, igniting a chill that danced along my spine. My determination wavered, dissolving away like grains of sand slipping through my grasp. The atmosphere hummed with an unsettling energy, a palpable tension that hinted at peril, and in that instant, I realized that the boundaries we had once established had vanished entirely. "Tell me to leave," he said. His voice had taken on a softer quality now. "Indeed, I shall." I gazed at him, truly gazed, and for the first time in weeks, I permitted myself to recognize the tension that had been simmering between us. The palpable tension, the furtive glances exchanged, the quickening of my heart in his presence. Everything was present, unmistakable, and inescapable. Yet, the words eluded me. I found myself unable to utter the words that would send him away, for deep down, I wished for his presence to linger. And that was precisely the response he sought. The instant I chose silence over confrontation, I realized I had crossed an irrevocable boundary. The tension between us was palpable, hanging in the air like an unspoken truth. It enveloped us, a relentless force that consumed everything in its path, leaving no room for escape or resistance. My heart raced at the sensation of his presence, nearer than it had ever been, yet still lingering in anticipation, continuing to offer me the opportunity to reconsider. However, I would refrain from doing so. I was unable to. Logan's breath flowed evenly, his hands resting at his sides, held in check. The warmth emanated from him, my skin igniting with the realization that this was the pivotal moment. The instant when everything transformed. I withdrew slightly, creating a delicate gap between us, yet preserving the tautness that lingered in the air. "We can't come back from this," I murmured, my voice scarcely rising above a whisper. "I have no desire to do that." His response came swiftly, with unwavering certainty, and in that moment, the final strand of my defiance unraveled. I had lingered in the realm of pretense for far too long, engaged in a futile battle against a force that had already established its presence within me. All the excuses, all the rational justifications for why this should not occur, disintegrated beneath the force of the undeniable attraction that bound us together. I had persuaded myself that by evading him, by disregarding the intensity of his gaze, I could somehow will it all into oblivion. Yet, I had been deceiving myself. Logan bridged the distance that separated us, his fingers brushing against my arm, his touch delicate as a whisper, poised for my rejection. However, I chose not to. Instead, I inclined my head, my gaze probing his, aware that the instant I shifted, the instant I surrendered, there would be no return. And then, I took the plunge. The world faded into a haze, reason eluding my grasp like grains of sand, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I ceased to ponder, ceased to analyze, ceased to concern myself with the repercussions. Time took on a new rhythm after that. Moments melded into days, and days transformed into something altogether different. An insatiable yearning consumed me, compelling me to seek out reasons to draw near to him, to share the very air we breathed, to inhabit the same realm where this silent bond had lingered, waiting to ignite for far too long. Yet, reality has an uncanny ability to seep back in, regardless of how fervently one attempts to block it out. It unfolded on a tranquil Sunday afternoon, as the house lay enveloped in stillness and silence. My husband had come back the previous night, oblivious to the change in the atmosphere, the hidden truth that had taken hold beneath our very roof. He pressed his lips to my cheek as he departed for a round of golf, his touch a comforting echo, yet his presence felt unexpectedly distant. The weight of guilt ought to have consumed me, ought to have fractured the delicate reality I had painstakingly constructed. Yet it did not, and that filled me with a terror greater than any other. As I entered the living room, I found Logan seated there, his expression a mystery, his posture at ease, yet his eyes glinted with a keen awareness. He had an uncanny ability to see right through me, and I understood, without a word spoken, that he felt the storm brewing within me. "We can't keep doing this," I murmured, the words escaping my lips like a fragile whisper, devoid of strength. He regarded me intently for a prolonged moment before finally nodding, yet his acquiescence lacked any sense of finality. The silence lingered between us, heavy with the unspoken truths that hung in the air. I began to walk away, yet his voice halted my steps. "Do you feel remorse for it?" I ought to have agreed, to seize that moment and bring closure, to wipe away the past before it could unravel everything. Yet, as I glanced in his direction, the response was unmistakably etched upon my features. Negative. He gave a single nod, his jaw clenching slightly. "I feel the same way." And with that, the truth lay between us, steadfast and undeniable. I have no regrets about it. Not at that moment. Perhaps never at all. Yet, that understanding did little to alleviate the burden. For certain decisions, the conclusions are anything but tidy. Certain decisions linger in the shadows, shadowing your every move, a constant reminder that once a boundary is crossed, retreat is no longer an option. Always onward, into the uncharted.